Okay, so we'll start again. So the agenda for today will be profile enhancements. So we'll look at data domain discovery and entity and enterprise discovery. We'll also look at the changes that have been made in bad record and duplicate record management. Previously this was done through the analyst tool, so there's been some changes there. So we'll look at the introduction of human tasks, workflow, and Informatica Data Director for data quality. We will also look at a couple of transformation enhancements that have occurred in 9.5 and 9.5.1. So they are natural language processing, which is usable with the parser and labeling transformations. And we'll also look at a new transformation, the classifier transformation. So first we're going to look at some profiling enhancements and data domain discovery. So in 9.1 we could do a lot of good things with profiling, but there were still some gaps. We still had an inability to explore data from different perspectives based on a business purpose. And there was an inability to easily identify data in need of cleansing or masking columns without already knowing what types of data existed and where they existed. We didn't have the option to infer functional meaning or find sensitive data, and the inability to discover meaning and patterns across hundreds or even thousands of data objects and data elements, since we had to apply our rules to named ports. So we could pick a port and apply a rule, but we couldn't just ask, does any of these ports fit this particular rule? So our solution to this is Informatica Data Explorer's data domain discovery. So in a single wizard, we can infer and find functional meaning or sensitive data. And we can do this from one to many tables and columns of data. And we can do it against both data and column name metadata. And we can do all this using maplet-based rules, which DQ users will be familiar with. So as mentioned, some of the features we introduced was the option to infer functional meaning. And what we mean with this is we can infer meaning such as social security numbers, phone numbers, product code, credit card, etc. And we can infer based on the data in the actual columns or the metadata. And the discovery logic is based on rules and maplets. So nothing new in terms of how you do it. Risks around sensitive data, personal health information, or credit card holder details is some of the examples, and to increase awareness of data issues and these are the data domain groups that we have out of the box in 9.5. So credit cards, phone number, social security, email, zip code. And simply put, this is just a quick look here. We can basically, using this information, when we actually profiled our data, although the column was called customer number, we were able to confirm that it actually contains social security number data, and we basically, 100% of the data conform to that. So that will allow us, we may have known that already, it may have been something we weren't aware of, and it will allow us to treat that data in the correct manner now that we know what the actual data is, rather than just the format of the data, the patterns, etc. Previously we could have tested it just the pattern, but now we have a little bit more that we can do with that. So a little bit more information on the data domains that go behind all of this. They're managed in a data domain glossary. They can be referred in multiple data domain groups. When you open up the MRS, they are not actually visible in an MRS. They're basically across the domain. And the reason we do this is so that we have a centrally managed or governed set of data domain rules. So if we have rules where we want to find this sensitive information, we want everyone to be using the same rules. So the data domain discovery should not require users to have access to different projects or rules. We shouldn't have users wondering which social security rule should they use or which credit card rule, etc. It should be just a single rule across the domain, so everyone is using the same information to infer meaning within the data. So we can set up these rules, so you can set up for phone, or you can set up a single worldwide one, or else you could do kind of regional ones. And a lot of the rules are based on a maplet, but if you actually use a maplet to create one of these data domain groups, if you make a change to the maplet wherever you create that in your MRF, it won't automatically get actually populated up to the data domain. You need to do that manually, and that kind of avoids the issue of people making a change to a maplet and it having a knock-on effect elsewhere. You can kind of control this very well and make sure that only the correct people can make those changes. Again, this is, can be used through the analyst tool or the developer tool. Looks very similar in both, and the usage and kind of creation is similar in both. Quite simple to do, and like all using just rules and maplets that everyone will be familiar with. It's just a way of leveraging those to get a lot more value from them. So another profiling enhancement that we have is entity or enterprise discovery. You'll see it referred to as both probably. So entity discovery is the product name, but enterprise is kind of the concept or the overview of it. So you may see them referred to as both. So I'll mention both so that you know that they are one and the same. Again, we had a gap here. We had an inability to identify master data across the enterprise. We were to identify sources and relationships across very large systems, so thousands of data objects. So in 9.1 and previous versions of profiling, we could find relationships, but you basically had to go in and set the system to kind of do an overlap discovery or foreign key profiling to check if there was a relationship between some sources that you picked out yourself. You didn't have the option to just ask it to go and find that across large numbers of data objects. There was an inability to holistically identify relationships across entire databases and application environments. I was often found that documented relationships may prove to be unreliable, as these have changed to the models often, changes to these models often occur over time and may not have been documented as they should have been. And then you also can have files in many legacy systems where they don't actually have any metadata, so there is no documented metadata there that will allow you to connect the information, and that's where we can kind of use this to data to actually make those connections. So our solution is entity discovery. It's an extension of foreign key profiling in IDE. It's very similar to that. It's just rather than you having to pick out the exact tables or data objects that you want to check for foreign key relationships or an overlap, you basically can just send it into a full database or a number of databases, and it will run all of the profiles and do the rest of the work in a single place. So using a single wizard, we can infer relationships across potentially heterogeneous data objects based on data. We can do that from one to many tables and columns of data. And then once we've done that, we can visualize the related entities and the groups of inferred relationships across those data objects. And we'll see some screen shots of that in a minute. So basically, all of this profiling discovery is run by a single profile model job. So we can, in a single job, we can do data domain discovery, entity discovery or foreign key profiling, column and data object profiling, and primary key profiling. And again, we can do this across any number, and that's up to thousands of data objects. So you can pick entire schemas, application databases, your entity data warehouse, etc. So obviously, the more you pick, the more resources it will require. But if you have the resources there, you can do this across huge data sets and numbers of data objects. Basically, what we have is a single step to automate data profiling across thousands of tables. So when you start the wizard, it will allow you to, you can simply just actually, if you've created a connection, you can do that connection and it will automatically select every table underneath that. Or you can go in and pick particular tables if you want to. The flexibility is there to do it very, very quickly. You can select entire connection databases in one go.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you just have to kind of go through the usual wizard steps. And what we come back with, once it's run all of the profiles, you will get a diagram similar to this. So this is our enterprise landscape or topology. And it's groups of related tables and files that are interactively displayed. Each one of those circles on that diagram would refer to a separate schema or database. The size of the circle is in proportion to the number of tables or data objects that were in that schema or that object. And then you can actually drill down further into that. So by just double-clicking on one of those circles, it will actually bring you in and show you what the all of the tables that are connected in that particular domain. And you can kind of see the various relationships. So in this particular one, and we'll see this in a little more detail in a minute, the customer table is at the center of our diagram at the moment. And we can see all the relationships to that customer table.
Version 9.
And then we can continue to drill down further. So you can continue to drill down to the same level as you can do with profiling in 9.1. So you can drill down and see all of the usual information, such as the data type, patterns, number of nodes, etc.
The things that you're supposed to do first because they're paying us for it.
And then you can drill down to analyze profiling stats and details. So you can kind of drill, you can go from that very high level diagram all the way down to the row level data and see the information there. So by increasing the scale of profile data while simplifying the process, it gives us better ability to discover and focus in on data and the issues and results.
No, I haven't.
So just a little bit more information on the entity diagram.
Hi, excuse me. Sorry to interrupt you. Can I have someone put on mute? We are hearing a lot of voices in the echo. Except the presenter, if the rest of the folks can put on mute, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a little bit more information on the entity diagram that we can drill down into. So as we can see, if you hover your mouse over one of the lines, it will actually show you what the relationship there is. The arrows that are in the diagram will point in the direction of the primary key. You can right-click then to pin a different object as the focus. So if I was able to click on this and select that menu option, the address table would then become the focus of our diagram, and then we would see the relationships that that has with other tables. And then the different colors that are on the diagram indicate the degree of separation from the selected object. So the green object is our selected item, the blue objects have 1 degree of separation, and so on. And there's other options at the top of the screen, so you can filter some data here, you can zoom in, zoom out. There are various options there, and then you can kind of change the level, so you can kind of remove some of the detail from your diagram or add more as you need to. But very powerful, and as mentioned, you can then drill down further within those as well, because beneath each one of these items on this diagram is a separate profile, and you can see all that information then, as you would have done before. So that is the profiling section. What we're going to move on to next are some updates to our exception and duplicate record management. So in 9.1 and previous versions, we could run our bad record mapping, our duplicate record mapping, bring those tables into the analyst tool, and then we could have our users interact and correct the data. But there was no, that was all outside of DQ. There was no way to track the actual progress of that job. It was those processes were not within the data quality domain, so we couldn't actually track when that information had been corrected, etc. So there was an inability to track and monitor progress of human tasks in an exception management process. And also that led into, there was no notification options for participants and those overseeing the process. There was an inability to distribute the tasks automatically, which also meant that we couldn't ensure that there was balanced distribution of those tasks. And also the fact that we were using the analyst UI meant that we had 2 inconsistent UIs. So MDM had the Informatica Data Director and Data Quality was using the analyst tool. So we wanted to kind of correct that and move to a common UI. So the actual MDM Data Director and Data Quality Data Director are not the same URL. You would have to set up a separate service. But if your users are familiar with one of the UIs, then the other UI will be second nature to them. There won't be any difference there. That's what we were aiming with. So the solution for this is our data quality workflows, which allow the tracking of human tasks. We have the ability to notify users and set timelines for task completion, and the option to distribute tasks in a balanced manner. And then Informatica Data Director provides a common UI experience for data stewards and other users. So what's new? So we have automated mapping orchestration. So now in our exception mappings, when you generate the actual tables on our staging database, they are added to the mapping automatically. So there's no, everything is connected correctly. So it reduces the time taken to actually generate your duplicate records or exception mappings. We can include human steps in our process, and we have the ability to send email notifications. So that's the benefit to our DQ developers. And then to our end users, we have the Informatica Data Director UI, which is a lot clearer, it's a lot more task-driven. So it's a consistent UI with IDQ and MDM. Everything is task-driven, so it's a list of kind of finite tasks that users can see and work on. And then automated approval process. So once a user has finished their task, that can be passed on to a review process, which is all still within the actual data quality process, and it's all within the workflow. So this is a look at an exception workflow. First item we look at, we see here is just a mapping. It's a DQ mapping, no different to any other DQ mapping. So if you've ever created a mapping that uses the exception transformation or a mapping that generates the correct table structure, you can pop that in here. It doesn't have to be changed at all. And that you use that then to identify the exceptions or duplicates, and it loads the data to our staging table. At that point in the process, previously we would have brought those tables into our analyst tool, but that is no longer the case with this. So we then have a human task, and the human task we create and manage a task. We assign tasks to users, and this can contain multiple steps to facilitate the approval processes. We'll see in more detail the actual human task in a minute. We'll down into that. We also have the option for notification tasks. So this allows us to send a high-level email saying our data quality mapping is finished and tasks have been assigned to users, rather than having to see all the detail of the actual tasks. So you can just get high-level emails, etc., like that. So it allows kind of different levels of notification to various users. Your higher-level users may not want to kind of hear all the ins and outs of what's been done. They just want to hear when something starts and when it finishes. And then once the actual human task finishes, as part of the workflow, we can then put in some post-processing mappings as well. So we can use that to read cleansed data from staging table, process it further, write it to targets, whatever it might be. So again, this was all something that had to be done outside of a DQ process. There was no way of tracking this previously. We kind of had to judge when it was safe to run that mapping without kind of any automatic process in place. So if you actually right-click and drill down into your human task, you'll see something like this. So it opens in a separate tab, so it's all in the same screen, so you can just move between the tabs to see what's there. It looks very similar to the other workflows, so you still have a start and an end event. In this particular one, we have a cluster step, so we've generated a duplicates table, and we want our end users to go in and review that data and make some decisions based on. So obviously we have some records here that they didn't score high enough for us to decide to automatically urge them, not low enough that we want to kind of reject them. So we're going to kind of use our end users to make some decisions based on those, and then kind of they can process them further. And within this we can configure participants, we can set the task duration, and we can set our notifications as well. Then we also have a review step. And that will allow us to set up who is going to review the updates, how long they'll have to review the changes, and any notifications that we want to send to users that they have received some stuff they need to review. So then to kind of show it even a little bit further down in detail, just to kind of show how simple and quick this can be to configure. Within our human task, we pick the participants that we want to have. So you can bring up the list of all users who can log in. So if you were connected with LDAP, it would bring up that list of users obviously as well, and your native list of users. And you can then assign a task to either a number of individual users, or you can pick a particular group if you want. If you've set up groups, you can then set that. Having chosen that, then you need to decide how you want to distribute the tasks. If you have a group of users, you may want to kind of do that by data value. So if there's particular data that you want certain users to actually review, you can actually set that up. You can set up some rules to take care of that. You can have other slightly simplified and just do the number of items per task, or you might want to kind of, if you have 10 users, you may want to set up 10 total tasks so that each of them gets kind of an even, roughly even number of items they have to work on, allowing for not being a kind of equal divide. On how you're going to distribute the tasks, then you can just simply set some timeouts on this. So in this particular case, we've set a duration of 10 days. So from the time that we run the mapping, the users get a notification. They have 10 days to go in and work on that data. Obviously, you can go right down to different levels there, so it's very flexible. And then you can also decide what you want to do if a timeout occurs. So if we go beyond 10 days, what's going to happen then? And in this particular case, we're going to reassign the task, and it's going to be reassigned to our manager user. You can kind of reassign, or there's other options there as well. So. And finally, you can just set up some notifications. They're kind of notifications I mentioned. So, well, you can set these up when a task is created or when they complete, or you could maybe just set them up when something is escalated or reassigned. So, depending on the level, you can change that. So, certain users might want to know when something's escalated. Other users might only want to know when it's complete. So, you can configure all that. You can configure different notifications. And you send those out via email. You will need to have an email server configured to do that. We don't include an email server with the application, so that would need to be there, but we can simply just connect in and just use any standard email server will work fine. So that's how you would configure a human task. And like I said, all of that then, it's all basically, all of the human elements of our data quality management process are kept within the system, so we can actually review those and see how those are going. They will actually be available in the monitoring tab as well, that work was completing. So having run our human workflow mappings and generated those tasks, our users then log into the Informatica Data Director, and the first thing they would see would be the inbox. And within the inbox, they will see the list of tasks that is assigned to them. If you are a super user, for example, an administrator, you could see all of the tasks that are there for different users. If you're not, if you're just a standard user, you'll only see the tasks that have been assigned to yourself. You don't get to see anything else. Within that UI, then you can filter those tasks. So you can filter by ID or title and the task type. If you had access to more than one owner's set of tasks, you can owner. You can filter on the due date or the status or the date created. And you can also, it's not entirely clear, but there's a little small, just there, those little dots beside the title. Those are arrows to allow you to sort the tasks in either ascending or descending order. So you may want to sort all your tasks by due date so that you can work on the ones that are due soonest first, etc. So very configurable. And obviously then you can kind of just switch off that filter if you want to kind of go back and see all of the tasks again. And again, we have a number of task options, so you can just look at the task details. You can open a task to start working on it. If you have been assigned a task but you want to release that so that some other user can have that assigned to them, you can do that as well. And then for every task that's been assigned to yourself, or if you're an administrator, for all the tasks you can view, you can see the audit trail, and we'll see a little bit more on that later. But that'll allow you to see what changes have been made. So we track all of the changes, so that that's reviewed later, and you can see that information. And it's also within the UI as well, which we'll see in a second. So in our first screen here, we're going to look at an example of editing some exceptions. So this will be a bad record table that we've generated. So we've done some data quality checks where we're testing, in this particular case, we're testing to ensure that the gender field is correctly populated, that our country field is to the standard that we want, and also kind of hidden behind that there's some other stuff there as well. But you can kind of see the idea anyway. Again, you can filter all the records by data value. So if you wanted to just pick out particular records, so you can just filter by those and then kind of just work on those. So again, you can sort them ascending, descending, etc. You have a lot of options there. Also, you have this option here, customize table, which will allow you to pick which columns are displayed. So if you have a large table, you may want to display a few columns. You don't want to just clutter. You may feel it's kind of too much information on the screen and difficult to read, so you can actually customize all that. So very powerful and very easy to use. And then if you actually have got some of these issues, so as you can see, the issues where we've found a data quality issue, we highlight that with a little small exclamation mark and the red icon. If you want to actually see what the problem we found is or what was reported from, you just hover your mouse over that icon and it will tell you. So in this particular case, it's showing the United States as an invalid country. So obviously we're checking to make sure that it's maybe the two-letter ISO code are similar. And so the full United States is outside of those parameters, so we flag that as invalid. And then if you do make an edit to the data, and it's simply a case of once you've actually opened up a task to edit, you just double-click into a field and you can just type in information, and then it's just a case of clicking the Save button up here. That will actually save that information. You then get the icon changes and you get that little green tick mark beside it to indicate that something has changed there. And if you want to actually see what's changed, you can just click on that and it will show you what the old value was, who changed it, and on what date it was changed as well. And you'll also notice over here we have a few other icons. So the little tick mark says that we've accepted that record. We also have a little blue flag that tells us that we've marked that as viewed. So once you've done all the editing, you would then go to your task action, and you can then assign that and say, I'm finished working on this, move it on to the review step, and at that point it leaves your inbox. You've finished doing the work on that, and it moves to the review step, as we saw in our human task workflow. It will go on to there. So when you go back to your inbox, it'll be gone. So you can move on and work on other tasks. And as we have most of those options that are on the buttons are in this menu as well. But we also have an option in here to export data. So if you want to export out the information, it'll export it out to a CSV file. If you want to kind of take a look at the information there, so you can actually share information via CSV if required. You need to kind of do that for whatever reason. And then the other type of data you may be editing in there is clusters or duplicate records. So we've run our mapping. We've done some matching on our records. We've identified potential clusters of records. But as mentioned earlier on, they're not scoring high enough that we want to maybe merge these records together to create a preferred record automatically. And we want to kind of have some interaction just to confirm that the data there should be merged together or not. So in this case, we had 4 records, and the first record is the one that goes above the preferred line. It may not necessarily be the best record of the ones that are in the cluster. It's literally just the first record that was there. That gets put in as preferred, so it's basically then up to the user to then make kind of decisions based on that. But everything above the line is, if we went and saved records, everything above that dark line is what's going to be saved as our final record. If we want to make a change, if we want to move some of that information around, all you have to do is just double-click in the field below the line, and will automatically promote that value up into the actual preferred record. So very quick and simple just to double-click those and move them around. Or else, if you want, you can promote an entire record to the preferred record. So if the preferred record is not the one you want to keep, you see another record that you feel is much more accurate, and you want to keep all of that, you can just move all of that up to the preferred record instead. And again, you have the same options over here on the menu, and again, you can export your data from there as well. And we also have an option to find or create clusters. So the find clusters will allow you to do a kind of wildcard search to bring in other records that you may want to join. And if you want to create a new cluster, you literally just click on Create Cluster. It will then create a empty, so it basically splits your screen so that you have your original cluster, and then at the bottom of the screen you would have what would have been an empty cluster until I made some change. And what I would have done then was just put a tick box in these areas here, and then you can just move the records from one cluster to another. And the find option is very similar. it will show you your original cluster, the cluster that you would have found, and then again you can just move records between those as you want. And then if you save, it will save the two of those as a separate cluster, or else you can go back and undo that as well. But it's a nice interface where you can kind of see the records and you can move the information around and you can kind of see what's going on. So everything is there in front of you, and it makes it kind of pretty user-friendly and pretty easy to review the data, and you can see it all. You can make kind of your decision quite quickly and move the information that you want around. And then finally, the audit trail that we mentioned. So for any change you make, you get an audit trail. So if it was a bad record or the exception record and you change an item, so in our case we changed the country from United States to US, or we put in the correct gender, etc. You'll see that in your audit trail, and it'll have that little icon, which is actually just a little pencil beside any field that there was an edit made on. And if you hover over those, it'll basically tell you what the value was. So the audit table will track that, and it gives information, as you can see in the first column here, the all-important, who updated it and when they made that update. And similar for our duplicate records, except for in this case, for information it tracks is any information that was moved from any other record in the cluster into what we made then our preferred record. If we just accepted our preferred record, then there wouldn't be anything in it. All it would be just the acceptance would be in the audit trail, nothing else. If you make any changes where you move data around within those to make up your preferred or golden record, we will actually kind of then show what was moved, and then again you can hover over that to get more information. Again, that audit trail is only available if just a standard user. You can see the changes you've made, and if you're an administrator, you can go in and look at all this information as well. So different levels, user get different access to how many different tasks they can see audit trails for. And it's all done on a task basis. Select the task and then go to the audit trail to see the audit trail for that. Rather than just getting a big dump of all the changes that have been made, it can be quite difficult to find what you're looking for then. We keep the kind of task-driven kind of model by that way. So those were the changes to our bad record management, exception record management process. So we've introduced the human workflow, human tasks, all of that into a workflow that allows us to track the steps that were essentially, they were all part of our data quality process before, but we had no way of tracking them. Now we will actually track them, and you can see when those complete and monitor that information. The next thing we're going to take a look at is language processing. So this affects a couple of our transformations, the parsing and labeling. So any of the transformations where you might have used reference data, such as our dictionaries, or else you might have used token set or regex, etc. You can use a lot of this in here as well. So again, the problem when we were parsing or standardizing, it works fine if a column just has an address or a company, etc. So if we have some clear identifiers in there, it's great. But if we get into kind of data that has some gray areas in there, or it's just a line of text, it can be very difficult to parse out that information in a simple manner. And we required an exact match to reference table entries, etc., to make a positive match. And we often use numerous transformations within a mapping to parse and label data. So we might have had some in there that were using reference tables to identify known values. We may then have been using some token sets as well for different token types, so word, number, code, other information like that. We may also have utilized regular expressions for some custom data structures. And we might have been using patterns which we had derived by profiling the data, picking out the patterns that we felt were correct, and then kind of matching to those patterns. So a lot of information was being used. We will continue to use all of this, except for now we're going to smarter way so that we don't actually have to have every single entry in a reference table to get a positive match. Not every single token, not everything has to match the token set to get a match. We're going to basically build up some patterns that will allow us to work better. So the solution is to use probabilistic models to predict relations between words. It will allow labeling of ambiguous data and a reduction in the complexity of DQ mappings. This kind of follows from the idea that all text follows repetitive patterns. So chapter 1 of a book would have similar textual patterns as chapters 2 to 30. And then in a more data quality related kind of example, the first 2,000 addressed line 1 elements from a given database will probably have very similar patterns to lines 2001 to 1 million. So if your data is getting put in a certain way, if you analyze a random sample of that data, it's highly likely that you're going to pick out patterns that are very, very applicable to the rest of your data. And once we have those patterns, they can be analyzed and we can gather statistics from those that analysis. And then based on that, we can identify probabilities of a type event that can be calculated and labeled appropriately. So an example of the problem we're trying to solve with this. So we have a piece of text here which is coming in as all a single field. So we have broadcasting house, attention of Hillary Thomas, the rooms G12, and then their accounting services engineering. So a lot of information in there, but all just in a single piece of text. Very, very difficult for us to work with a lot of the time. So basically what we want to output the information below. So we want to output the location, person then name. We want to output location for the room and then an organization as well. So this would have been a typical mapping that we may have had to produce to do this before. So we have a number of labelers in there, standardizers, etc. So we're also kind of going to have to parse information probably prior to that to do that. So quite a lot of work in there to do all that. And we're essentially working on one piece of the data at a time. And if we have 1 million rows of data, we may find that we run our final test and we might find that 10,000 records fall outside of that. And then we have to go and start drilling into those and working on those. And as you kind of work towards kind of that kind of ideal level, you end up having to put more and more work in for less and less kind of benefit as you get into the kind of data that would be kind of on the edge of your patterns, etc. So yeah, a lot of work involved for very little gain once you actually get up to those kind of, trying to kind of nail down that final few percent to get good, accurate results. So what we're going to do to fix this is use natural language processing techniques. So that reduces mapping complexity and ongoing maintenance work, and it's faster times to better results. So in terms of maintenance work, what we mean there is reduce the amount of maintenance that you have to do on your reference tables. So there's no more updating reference tables with additional data to pick up on new cases that are found. No more tweaking regexes to pick up on new pieces of information that weren't quite parsed correctly, etc. And by doing this, we can reduce our previously complex mapping down to single labeler on one mapping, and just reduce the complexity. And all of this can be, once you've actually created a model, you can reuse this as well. Our previous case here, our first mapping, it's probably quite, because of the actual complexity, it's probably not going to be highly reusable. It's going to be difficult to reuse that or get other cases where you may be able to apply all of that work again. But with our new methods, we can reapply all of this very simply, and it's very easy to transport between systems. So in this particular case, what we've done is we've brought in some information around some TV models. We've done some work already, and we can see that quite a number of brands, etc., are actually being kind of picked out, but a lot of information is not getting picked out. And we've done this on a small data set. And if we want to kind of refine this further, rather than having to go in and edit our reference tables or go and make changes to regexes, etc., we can just train the model further by picking out the actual label. So in this case, we're going to pick the label where we're going to label the actual brand of TV that we're working with. So we just select that label. And in this particular case, I obviously can't see this on the slide, but all I would have to do is on the highlighted line is double-click on JVC. It would move JVC into our brand column, and at that point, that will be added to the model. And once you've double-clicked that data item, you just need to save and compile your model. And at that point, you've updated it. So again, if you had 1 million records, you may want to base your model on 2,000 records, or even you could try it for less if you want. Run a test, see what kind of percentage you're getting in terms of accurately labeling the data. Then you may want to train the model a little bit further. But the idea is you can reduce maybe what could be 10 iterations of editing reference tables, editing token sets, etc. You can reduce that number of iterations down to 2 or 3 iterations of training the model. And it's kind of all in a single screen. There's a lot less kind of interactions involved to make these changes. So it speeds up the whole process of doing this. And in terms of using this, we do kind of have some, basically when we're doing this, we kind of want to use one or more labels and entities, and we wanted to find those elements of data to be identified. So in this case, we identified brand, code, screen resolution, type, etc. But it is better to use high-level concepts. So do use a label for color and to accept all the colors for products, but don't use one label per color, etc. You wouldn't, and in our case above, you wouldn't kind of use different labels for the different types of TV, be it LCD. So you wouldn't have a label called LCD TV, you wouldn't have a label called LED TV. You just have a type and you put all of them into that. And in all cases we have a other label, and that will essentially be our overflow where you will get the information that didn't get parsed. That's fine if you're not trying to parse that information, great, but that would also be where you would look to see if there's any information that you wanted to get parsed but wasn't actually done this time. So it does speed up greatly the amount of information you have to do. And the actual models that you create, those models are stored in content sets, so they can be exported and reused. Two options when you're exporting these. You can export the full model, or else you can actually just export the actual compiled version. If you export the full model, you can continue to retrain that further. So if you're moving between test environments, that would be great. If you're moving, though, for example, maybe from your test environment to your user acceptance environment, you don't want anyone making any changes, then you would just send over the compiled model, and no one can make an edit to that. It's completely usable. Everyone can kind of make use of it, but you can't actually make any changes. So it kind of allows you to control who's making changes to your content sets very well as well. The model creation then can utilize reference tables, token sets, regular expressions, any patterns covered via profiling. So we can reuse all the information that we've used before. And then once we've created these models, we essentially utilize that information in a much better way, and we get a lot more benefit from that information, and we get a lot more reusability. And we do reduce the number of iterations in terms of moving from good results to very good results. That was the natural language processing, and like I said, that's available in a couple of different transformations. The labeler and parser are the ones at the moment. The final one we're going to look at today is our classifier transformation. This is new to 9.5.1, so it's pretty recent. So one of the problems we had was difficulty in classifying data so they can be processed appropriately. So problems maybe identifying different languages or product data, or classifying issues logged with support organization based on the description, or identifying confidential or classified information, picking out spam so that we don't actually lose any useful information. And one of the tests that was done when the developers were testing this was to actually run Twitter feeds through this and actually try and pull out the useful information from that and kind of just discard everything else. So the solution is to use the classifier transformation, which uses common algorithms to classify data. And these algorithms are based on word frequency. So to actually classify a piece of product data, you don't have to put in every product you're ever going to face. You just need to put in a good representation of those products when you're training an actual model. And then it will be able to then use the algorithms to basically pick out other models that you haven't actually listed. So the classifier configuration is very simple. As any other transformation, if you've used one of these, any of the transformations before, it should be pretty familiar to you. A single transformation to classify many languages. So that's what we have at the moment. It's again in the content set. So as part of the 9.5.1 content set, we included a language classifier, which will allow you to classify 10 different languages. That was the only one available in 9.5.1, and there will be more as we move through the hot fixes, and we will also be providing the ability for users to train their own models, so you can feed in your own information, develop your own model. But as I mentioned, this is brand new in 9.5.1, so it's still got a couple of limitations there that will be removed as we move through the hot fixes, which are going to be coming out in the next couple of quarters. But in this particular case, just looking at our results, we fed in 8 different languages. As you can see in our classifier output field here, we've actually picked out the correct language, so Turkish, Dutch, Spanish, etc. We have one line here, line 6, where we have 2 languages. What it will do is it will actually only give you one output. It won't tell you this is English and German. It will basically pick out the first language that it can actually identify. In this particular case, it would output. So you'll only ever get one output, and that kind of needs to be kind of something that will be watched. So it's quite powerful. If anyone understands those languages, if they don't make a huge amount of sense, that was done using Google Translate. So it may not be 100% accurate, but the actual classifier was still able to kind of recognize the languages correctly once we ran them through. So let's see. Just a single transformation was able to identify a number of languages, so very simple to use once you have the model in place. So that kind of finishes our whistle-stop tour of what's new in DQ. It's not kind of everything that's there, and we basically picked out the key features. If you want to see what else might be new, I would recommend you use the communities forum site where you can get the product documentation. And if you go in there and filter down to the 9.5.1 products, you'll see the new features and release guide. And within that, you will be able to get that information. I can see a couple of questions there around the PowerPoint, etc. I know we're going to be uploading the WebEx and I believe the PowerPoint to our that same portal as well afterwards, so we will be giving that information out, so you will get all of that as well. But I would recommend that as a further reading if you want to see it, but those documents are technical documents, so they can be kind of quite high in technical detail and a bit low on kind of screenshots, etc. So that was the purpose of this webinar, to give you a good feel for what's new and how it can be used. That is essentially everything that we have. So I think we hopefully have a few minutes for any questions. So I see if there's some of these have come in on chat.
Hey, Robert. I had a question on IDD interface extension. You did mention earlier, as of now, it's not possible, but is it in the roadmap?
I'm not sure. I don't know that answer right now. What I can do is I can check with our product manager. So what we plan to do is when we post this up onto the forum, what we're also going to do is we'll add any questions we couldn't answer here, we'll add them as a reply on that as well. So if you keep an eye on that, you should see the answer there. I can check that out. I'm not sure the exact details of what they're planning to do with that, so I need to check that with PM. So basically just can you, is this around extending it in the same way that you can with the MDM? Informatica Data, or the Data Explorer for MDM, is that correct?
Right.
Question for everyone else was in MDM Data Explorer, we do have options. It's much more configurable, and the question was, will we have the same options in the IDQ version? And essentially, as mentioned, I don't have the answer for that right now, but we will post up an answer on that if we once we get that from PM.
Cool, thanks. Just one more. As of now, Data Director cannot work with the ODBC database. Again, the same thing. Is it in the roadmap, and when would it be introduced?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
As of now, Data Director cannot work with an ODBC database. It needs to have native connectivity.
I think that may remain as native connectivity for the moment, but I'll check that out. I'll see if there are any plans for that as well.
Thank you.
I can see a few questions here, so I'm just going to jump through a couple of questions on chat just for a minute. One was, so reference page 11, can we schedule profiling of multiple of number of maybe? You can create a profile model, and you can then schedule that. You could then run that from the command line. Could actually kind of use an external scheduler. We don't have an option to schedule those within the tool yet, but using the INFASupport command, you can schedule profiles, and you will be able to, if you want to use cron in Unix, or if you wanted to use just task scheduler in Windows, or something that's more robust than that, you could use those to schedule those jobs as well. Another question I can see here is, can changes be done in the data patterns that are done in the profiling repository? Changes being done in the data patterns are done in the profiling repository. Where are these changes saved? That was referencing page 21. let me just go back to page 21 because I see if I can get some context on that question, or if the person who asked that question is on the call, just give a little context on it. So 21, change has been done in data. Okay. Changes been made on page 21 are made to staging tables. So any change you make within IDD will be saved to the staging table under that stores the actual issue itself. And that was where in our workflow, so in this post-processing step here, that might be where you would read from those tables, the staging tables, and then write that information to your actual production database or whatever your actual process to take the changes that have been edited and then pass them on out to a further system. Other questions then are, can we get we will be giving out copies of presentations, so that's fine. I have another question here. Is there a way to assign names and task title to exceptions? So can we actually change the name of the exception? So can we change this? Is that question, can we change this from exception step to something else? I don't believe that's possible. Okay. I'll check and see. I'll see if that's on the roadmap. I'll see if we have plans to make that. Not at the moment, as far as I'm aware, but I'll check and see if that's possible to change that name. Just taking note of these questions here. Those are the questions that have been asked so far. Actually, I have one over here. Can the classifier transformation translate languages? No, it can't actually translate languages. It can just identify languages. We don't have anything in data quality that will translate languages, but we can identify them. We can do some transliteration rather than translation in some of the applicants, but we don't do translation. That's not something, and I'm not aware of any plans to have that anytime soon either.
Hi, I have one quick question.
Sure.
Is any possible for 9.5 a column level profiling for COBOL files?
If you can read well, you probably wouldn't be able to read it directly. If you can read the file if you can bring the file into Informatica, be that through Power Exchange, or if you can read it in using some other method, then we can profile it. If you can get the information into the system, we can profile it essentially. But we wouldn't be able to read those natively. But if you could use Power Exchange or something to parse those files, then that would be possible.
That means without using any Power Mediator tool, we can't do.
No, we wouldn't. Unless, again, you'd have to export it out to it has to be one of the ODBC. If you can connect it by ODBC or one of the native connections, then we can profile it. If you can't, or a flat file, obviously, will be another one that we can profile. But if it's not flat file, a native connection that we do, which is Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, and one other which escapes me right now, or ODBC, and we would not be able to profile it. So you would need to get it into the system using one of those methods to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Another question here, can we create the workflow using Informatica Developer? All of the workflow creation is done in Informatica Developer. I should, I guess, stress that this is not the same as Power Center workflow. It's not, it doesn't, we can't schedule them, etc. for the moment. You still have to invoke them via the command line, but I believe there are plans to add those options as we go, but for the moment, not an option. So we don't have a scheduler for DQ workflow just yet. You would, again, run that from the command line, and you could use an external scheduler for the moment. But again, there are plans.
I'm in a training. I need to ask.
Robert, is there any documentation?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, is there any documentation available on how to integrate IDQ with dashboards and proactive monitoring? Some use cases maybe?
There should be some information available. What I would suggest is if you post a question up on the forum, you should get that, or even just do a search. I know there has been some questions on that recently. I know there are documents on the dashboards on there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd check on there, or else if raise a service request if you're not finding any information, and we'll find that information, point you in the right direction.
Cool. Thank you.
I had one quick question.
Sure.
From the audit perspective, how long does the audit stay? Does it write it to the repository and it's there forever, or is there a time limit on it, and can you export it?
The audit tables are stored to your staging database, or there's another database I can't recall right now, but they are stored into the databases that we do set up in the schemas. The information is there essentially forever unless you actually go in and decide to purge that information out, and you can export it out to a CSV file as far as I recall.
Oh, yeah, okay, and you can run reports off it, okay. And I guess the question, that's fine. That's okay. I think that's enough information for what I need at the moment. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, another one, last one. As we run IDQ every day and generate more and more exceptions, the exception repository gets filled with data. Is there an archival process in place which can help archive or remove some of the data from the exception repository or those repository tables so that it doesn't slow down the new exception UI?
So you're referring to basically when we write our bad records or our duplicate records to a staging database, is there any way to, once that information has been worked on, is there any way to purge that information out automatically? That's the question?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. Essentially, that could be something that you could set up as part of your post human task processing. So if you've run your human task, you've then taken that data, loaded it to your production database, you could then maybe add in another another task or mapping that would actually.
Okay, sorry. I misspoke. I was talking about the task notifications and those repository tables.
Oh, the task notifications.
So after a task is closed, the task is still there.
So basically, when we actually send out a task notification, we do write that information to tables. Again, I'd have to check. I'm not sure if we get rid of that information once the notification has expired. Let me check that out. I'll see, and I'll add an answer to that on the form. So we do store that notification information into tables in the schema. I'll check and see, do we actually purge that information out at any point.
Cool. Thank you.
So, Robert, I think we will have all this. We will have the recording of this particular webinar and the PPT available on the My Support portal. So, right, we should have it available by tomorrow.
Yeah, we should have the recording up there. What I will do is I will endeavour to answer the questions that have been asked, any of these questions, and I'll save the chat as well here, and I'll basically put those questions. I'll put the answers to those questions up there as well. So I'll just put some replies onto the item when we log that onto the form, so you can gather all the answers there as well. So we should just keep an eye for that, and we should have that information there as soon as possible.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Robert. That was a very insightful presentation, and thank you all for taking time to attend this webinar. We will be posting the content on the support portal tomorrow, and we will also be responding back to all the questions that we did not get time to respond back today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. I will answer any of the questions we didn't get to afterwards as well. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Good stuff.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.